paragraph beginning, one problem still remains to be solved. Okay. I don't think we have read it, so we'll read it first and then we will go into each sentence. This earlier he has spoken about the one and the many and their connection. At the mental level, one and the many are opposites, but they are actually, there is always a correspondence between these opposites in the physical world. The dualities are always connected, okay? But it's the same stuff which is going from a high level to a low level, exactly like light slowly reduces itself, it becomes darkness. Exactly in the same way, because manifestation implies limitation and diminution. So it becomes the opposite in the physical world, and you start seeing it as opposites. Actually, they are not. So in the previous one, he has discussed the one and the many. They are connected. Just like as I told you, it's easy to imagine that one sea, which is absolutely calm, is the oneness. And then when the sea starts manifesting what it is capable of, it makes waves. So the waves become the individuals. At one time, each wave is conscious that it is part of the sea. But then as the waves become more and more strong and the descent goes on occurring, the one starts becoming the many, and at the lowest level, each of the many has forgotten that it is part of the sea. It has lost its oneness. That is the reason why we are in ignorance and we don't know that we have come from the divine, who is one. And we feel ourselves separated from everybody else in the physical world. That's one and the many. Now he is going to talk about the manifest and the non-manifest. Okay, so shall we start reading? Yeah, I'll do that. No, somebody has to read, no? So anybody, Yasmin maybe.
Yes, I will read.
Go ahead. One problem still remains.
One problem still remains to be solved, and it can be solved on the same basis. It is the problem of the opposition between the non-manifest and the manifestation. For it might be said that all that has been advanced hitherto may be true of the manifestation, but the manifestation is a reality of an inferior order, a partial movement derived from the non-manifest reality. And when we enter into that which is supremely real, these truths of the universe cease to have any validity. The non-manifest is the timeless, the utterly eternal, and an irreducible absolute self-existence to which the manifestation and its limits can give no clue, or only a clue that by its insufficiency is illusory and deceptive. This raises the problem of the relation of time to the timeless spirit. For we have supposed, on the contrary, that what is in manifestation in the timeless eternal is manifested in time eternity. If that is so, if the temporal is an expression of the eternal, then how different the conditions, how partial the expression. Yet what is fundamental in the time expression must be in some way pre-existent in the transcendent and drawn from the timeless reality. For if not, these fundamentals must come into it direct from an absolute which is other than time or timeless, and the timeless spirit must be a supreme spirit negation, an indeterminable basing the absolute's freedom from limitation by what is fundamental in time. It must be the negative to the time positive, in the same relation to it as the nirguna to the sarguna. But in fact, what we mean by the timeless is a spiritual status of existence, not subject to the time movement or to the successive or the relative time experience of a past, present, and future. The timeless spirit is not necessarily a blank. It may hold all in itself, but in essence, without reference to time or form or relation or circumstance, perhaps in an eternal unity. Eternity is the common term between time and the timeless spirit. What is the timeless, unmanifested, implied, essential, appears in time and movement, or at least in design and relation, in result and circumstance? These two then are the same eternity or the same eternal in a double status. They are a twofold status of being and consciousness, one an eternity of immobile status, the other an eternity of motion and status.
Okay, so he is describing he's going into great detail and time and timelessness. Okay, so in the physical world, everything is mutable, everything is moving, and movement cannot be possible without time. When time is static, nothing moves, isn't it? So that is what he is discussing here. But really they are same. They are really the same. I gave an interesting example which makes you understand that the timeless and the time are really the same. Okay. Take the clock. Okay. So the clock is, you have a second hand, and the second hand is moving around the circumference of the clock. Okay, and it's, let us say it starts from 12, it goes 1 second at a time, and in 5 seconds it covers the 5 seconds, it comes to 1, then again it comes to 1, but it is doing that smoothly, or is it doing that staccato movement? Okay, staccato means 1 second stop, then 2 seconds stop, 3 seconds stop, 4 seconds stop. So you can clearly see that there is a sequence of movement, and when movement is there, time is automatically implied. Okay. Now let us say instead of stopping at 1 second, the clock is made to stop at half a second. Okay, then half a second, half a second, half a second. The movement is the same and the time taken is the same, but the smoothness of the movement of the second hand seems to be much smoother, and it will become very smooth. Instead of half a second, now I make it a quarter second, I make it a 1/10 of a second, and I make it 1 millionth of a second. So although it is stopping every 1 millionth of a second, does it not seem to you to be absolutely smoothly moving? So this is the image which explains to you how time and timelessness are the same. The smooth time factor is actually in the physical world, you see everything as in time moving. But at the highest level, it is stopping. There is no movement at all. So it is like the clock. When it is moving, it's a physical world. When it is not moving, it's a spirit. Okay? So this is what also Ramakrishna says. In Bengali, he says, Jal sthir holeo jal. When the water is absolutely calm and without movement, it is water only. But it is the Satchidananda. It is the static condition of the highest level. It is spirit. It is God. But when that the sea, the one jal, starts making movements, it becomes the physical world. So apparently, if you see, they seem to be opposites. But really they are the same. Because in the movement, underneath the movement, there is the timeless always there. So this is what Swami is explaining in this paragraph. So we start reading, keep this in mind, and we start reading. And this is true not only of time and timelessness, but one and the many, the form and the formless. There is gradation from one to the many. There is a gradation of the time and timeless. There is a gradation of form and formlessness everywhere. Even biologically, you can see that. Now, suppose you start or any animal, any living creature starts from the one cell which has been fertilized. But what happens now? It suddenly divides into two. Then the manifestation of whatever capacity is there in that starts becoming a fact. 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 5, 8, 8 becomes 16, 32. Now what happens? That one cell which seemed to be one starts dividing itself into so many different tissues: bone tissue, muscle tissue, okay, teeth tissue, light sensitive tissue, all differences come. So the one is becoming the many. Even in the physical world, this is a fact. So actually the one contains all the many, and all the many in the physical world, each of the many contains also the possibility of going back to the one. So this is what Srindra is saying. Okay. So time and timelessness are linked solidly together. They are involved in each other. In timelessness, the possibility of time is there. And in the time movement in the physical world, each moment is capable of becoming the timeless. If you remember that famous 4 lines, again you can do that. No? So, to see a world in a grain of sand, okay? Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. Those 4 lines from William Blake. So, very clearly they are connected. Now, with this background, we start reading the sentences. One problem still remains to be solved, and it can be solved on the same basis. That means to say there is a harmony and a connection between the two. It is the problem of the opposition between the non-manifest. The non-manifest is Satchidananda. It is itself, okay, Chit Ghana. It is concentrated in itself without any desire to manifest itself. And the manifestation, the physical world. Non-manifest, you can call it divine, you can call it the one, you can call it the static, you can call it the formless, whatever you want. It's all non-manifest. And the manifestation, the physical world. For it might be said, okay, now this is interesting, note the language carefully. This is not same to same. He's saying that somebody else, my opponent, okay, he may say, the one who is arguing with me, for it might be said that all that has been advanced hitherto, whatever I have said about the one and the many, may be true of the manifestation. But the manifestation is the reality of an inferior order. Okay? You clearly experience that when you make your mind silent, you feel that the physical world is not as real as the other one. Okay? A partial movement derived from the non-manifest reality, and when we enter into that which is supremely real, that's the self, okay, these truths of the universe cease to have any validity. The whole physical world appears only to be images without substance and no validity at all. Something which is a photograph can easily be torn and thrown away. It has no value. It's only indication something. The non-manifest is the timeless. There is no time there. Why should there be no time? Because it is immutable. It does not move. And if it does not move, there is no time. Timeless. The utterly eternal. Now, the timeless has necessarily to be eternal because it is the same everywhere. Throughout time, it is the same. So it is utterly eternal and irreducible, absolute self-existence. It doesn't need anything to exist. It exists by itself. To which the manifestation and its limitations can give no clue, or only a clue that by its insufficiency is illusory and deceptive. So when you are in the physical world, at our level, we are in ignorance. We can have no idea at all of what that self is. That's what he's saying. But even if you feel, even with your mental knowledge, you feel that yes, something can be there without any movement, okay, it is still insufficient. This raises the problem of the relation of time to the timeless spirit. Now, this is very interesting because it is very much related to, as you keep going higher and higher in consciousness, time actually slows down. Okay, because at the physical level, we have time. As you keep climbing in consciousness and you go beyond the mind and you enter the self, there is no time. You are experiencing the timeless, the immutable, the static. You become a witness. No movement at all. So what happened in between? So slowly the time starts becoming slower and slower and slower and slower until finally in the self there is no movement at all. It becomes slowest and it becomes absolutely static. So this is very interesting because if you see the phenomena of the what is called the Bermuda Triangle, okay, it's very interesting because one of the things that can be explained in the Bermuda Triangle, nobody explains it this way because they have not studied Srirangam. But when you go into the subtler levels of consciousness, time slows down. Okay. This is something that even Mother experienced, and she speaks about it in the agenda. She says that I am in a very strange position now. Sometimes I am in time, sometimes I am in timelessness. And when I am in timelessness, okay, something which should take only 3-4 minutes like brushing your teeth. She mentions that. Okay, it seems to be taking half an hour. Okay, it's taking a huge amount of time, and that which is timeless is becoming in time. So this is what she experiences. So as you keep going up, okay, time slows down. This is a fact even in the physical world. In the famous example of Einstein, he says if there are two twins on the earth, and one twin decides to remain on the earth and the other twin goes in a spaceship and goes round, and he is going at a very high speed. So with speed, time slows down. When you go at a higher level, even in speed, the time slows down. And by the time, in 2 years' time, when the twin who has gone out into the space comes back into the physical world, he sees that his twin has died, his twin brother. Why? Because 75, 80 years have already gone by. For him, which is only 2 years. Now compare this with the timeless and the time. As you keep going higher and higher, and in the physical world, it translates as faster and faster. Time is slowing down for you. In the self, in fact, there is no slowing down at all. There is absolutely no movement at all. So it's a gradual gradation from absolute static condition to a movement condition. Okay. So if you see that thing, you will understand. Also, there is something very interesting in the Bermuda Triangle, because sometimes these things which are there in the physical world disappear completely. So how to explain that? Okay. Now, is it not true that ice can be made into water and water can be made into water vapor? Unfortunately or fortunately, you can see the change. But when you go from the physical world to the life world, we don't see the change. So it is possible that gross matter can become subtle matter and it will remain there. And subtle matter you are not seeing. So I give you one example. Okay, think about it. It's very interesting. You may feel that I'm talking nonsense, but you think about it. Okay, there were 5 jets, modern fighter jets of America. Okay, and in recent times they were going at a speed, and suddenly they disappeared. So you can also question why every time it doesn't happen and why only sometimes it happens. That's a question that has to be explored and researched. That has not been done. But these 5 jets completely disappeared. So what has happened? One explanation could be that the gross matter has gone into the subtle matter and you don't see it. But it is there in the subtle world. Okay. So I'm just telling you, you start thinking about it, you'll be surprised as to the flexibility of time. Our idea that time is absolute is not correct at all. Right. So,
But hello.
Yes, tell me.
You know, in the Bermuda Triangle, it is not only that you disappear for a short time. People die, ships disappear, planes disappear.
That's exactly
but they
what
have to appear again. No, they do not appear.
Not necessarily. Okay, not necessarily. The ascetic is not appearing again. He decides to disappear. Okay, it's not necessary. It is possible. That is one of my students asked me. He said that when a materialization takes place, because in the ashram the stones are falling from nowhere, no? And then they decided, Swayambhu understood that this is a materialization. So one of the children asked me a very interesting question. He said that when the stone is appearing in the guest house and falling from around the height of the 6 feet or 7 feet, it is suddenly appearing and falling in the guest house. Now, does it have to disappear somewhere in the physical world and then appear here? So in the beginning, I got a little puzzled, but then I said that no, it can appear from the
Subtle physical.
Yeah, from the subtle physical, it can come into the gross physical, because that's exactly what is manifestation. The divine is manifesting himself from the subtlest to the subtle to the grossest, and finally the grossest. So it is possible for these things to transform itself into one another. That is the possibility. Just like ice can become water and water can become water vapor. Water can be water vapor can be so thin that you don't even see it, but it is still there. So this is what happens. It's very interesting. So I continue with this one. I mention all these things because you have to think about them, okay? And I am telling you about mother's experience. I have told you about the Bermuda Triangle and mother's experience also of the materialization of stones in the guest house. Okay? And so many, if you picture all these things and bring in the idea of time and timelessness, things start becoming somewhat clear. Okay? In fact, there is a very fantastic story, not story, an actual experience of something happened. Next time, okay, I don't think I can send it to you because it has to be typed out. But if I can scan it, I'll send it to you. It's about 4 or 5 pages. The experience of a lady, okay, who entered into the timelessness, okay, and could do physical work in the physical world. It's almost unbelievable, but she said that I just can't understand how it happened. I'll tell you. I'll try and get the thing. I'll scan it and send it to you. It's about 3 or 4 pages. I think the scanning will be possible. I'll send it to you. It's very interesting. This whole question, in fact, Sri Aurobindo has a 2-3 pages on it, how time and timelessness are connected. And the individual can exist in time and in timelessness at the same time, experiencing the different facets of this interesting relation between time and timelessness. Okay? So I leave you to mull and think about it. This raises the problem of the relation of time to the timeless spirit. For we have supposed, on the contrary, that what is in the unmanifestation, okay, you have to read it like that. For we have supposed, on the contrary, that what is in the unmanifestation, the supreme, okay, the Chit Ghana, the one that is concentrated only in the one and not interested in manifestation. That is one aspect of the divine, is completely absorbed in itself. Okay. In the timeless eternal, the unmanifestation is the timeless eternal, is manifested in time eternity. So we are thinking the timeless is coming into time eternity. If that is so, if the temporal is an expression of the eternal, then however different the conditions, however partial the expression, yet what is fundamental in the time expression must be in some way pre-existence in the transcendence and drawn from the timeless reality. So this is what Sri is saying here. We'll put it in other words. He's saying that the absolute static has a potentiality of becoming movement. The absolute one, when you experience it, you feel that there can be nothing else but the one. It has the potentiality of becoming the many. The absolute formlessness, you experience it as absolute. This is the question of Saguna and Nirguna. At the spiritual levels of consciousness, you feel that it is absolute. But in the spirit, when you go to the supermind, both the possibilities become clear to you. That's a third level. So this is what Sandra is saying. And the timeless contains time in secret. The time movement in the physical world contains in itself, deep inside it, as a potential, the timeless. Okay? Or in other words, the divine can become the human being and the human being can become divine. Both the potentialities are there. But it is also possible to experience it as impossible. The one cannot become the many, and the many can also not become the one. That also is possible because in the middle stages, you feel like that. Okay? That's the experience of the self. Okay, when you experience the self, you feel that the physical world is unreal. Okay, there's nothing in it. So, but that's only one aspect. They're all connected. You have to keep that in mind. If you go to the two extremes, then the solution comes. But in the middle, there'll always be confusion. So now Srendu is saying, I go to the next sentence. For if not, these fundamentals must come into it direct from an absolute, which is other than time and timelessness. If they are not time and timelessness, if they are not connected, then they are coming from something third element. The timeless spirit must be a supreme spiritual negation, an indeterminable, basing the absolute freedom from limitation by what is formulated in time. It must be the negative to the time positive in the same relation to it as a nirguna and the saguna. Now, I'll stop here. When you are in the spiritual planes of consciousness, you can experience the nirguna. But in the physical world, if you are going through bhakti, you can experience the saguna. You see the divine as a person, in the personal aspect. But they seem to be contradicted. When you are in the nirguna, it's absolutely impersonal. When you are experiencing the saguna, okay, you are experiencing the qualitative personal aspect of the divine. But they seem to be opposites. So where does the synthesis take place? At the supramental level. Okay. So this is what Sri Aurobindo says in another place also in Life Divine. The world and the spiritual consciousness both come from a third level, which is the supermind. And there are no contradictions and there are no self-contradictions. There are no oppositions. They are all absolutely perfectly harmonious with each other. That's what he's saying. Okay. But in fact, what we mean by the timeless is a spiritual status of existence, not subject to the time movement or to the successive or the relative time experience of a past, present, and future. The timeless spirit is not necessarily a blank. It may hold all in itself. That means potentially it can have the time factor in it. It holds everything in itself. But in essence, exactly that, in essence, without reference to time or form or relation or circumstance. In other words, the time movement is absolutely embedded but deep in timelessness. Okay? So, or to use other words, the transient is embedded deep as a possibility in the eternal. And the transient contains the eternal in itself, deep inside. The timeless spirit is not necessarily blank. In other words, it contains the essence of the time spirit. It may hold all in itself, but in essence, note the word essence, very important. Without reference to time or form or relation or circumstance. Each of the, you will see, without reference to time. Okay? When you are in the timeless, there is absolutely no time there. There is no form, you are in the formless. There is no relation, because relation means 2 or 3 or 4, multiplicity. The word relation relates to multiplicity. Or circumstance. Circumstance again, a moment in time. Perhaps in an eternal unity. Eternity is a common term between time and the timeless spirit. What is in the timeless, unmanifested, implied, essential, appears in time in movement, or at least in design and relation, in result and circumstance. Each word you examine, but I think we have discussed this sufficiently, and if you look at each word, you will see how it falls into place. Okay? It is there. In timelessness, time is there, hiding. It is there. And in the time, the timelessness also is there, hiding. That's a divine in you, but it is hiding. So, These two then are the same eternity or the same eternal in a double status, the one becoming the two. And they are the twofold status of being and consciousness, one an eternity of immobile status, the other an eternity of motion in status. Where do they get harmonized? At the third level. So level 1, you see the many and you see time. Level 2, the spiritual planes of consciousness, you see the one and the timeless. But you go to the third level, they are completely consistent with each other. You see that they are involved in each other. Okay, that completes the time and timelessness. We've got 10 minutes, maybe we've got even 15. So we can read the next paragraph.
Hello.
Yes, tell me.
You know what exactly is the relation between the supermind and the transcendence?
Okay. The transcendent is the supermind the supermind is always transcendent, because when you are in the supermind, you can feel that you are outside the universe. But even in the spiritual planes of consciousness, you can experience the transcendent, but you are not necessarily permanently in the transcendence. As I told you, even in the spiritual planes of consciousness, you can have glimpses of the supermind. It's possible, but only glimpses, not the permanent status. So the transcendent is a wide term which can be experienced at the second level also of the spiritual planes of consciousness. You feel, otherwise how to explain that when you make your mind silent, okay, you feel that you are in a transcendent consciousness. It's the spiritual planes of consciousness, not necessarily the supermind, but you feel you are temporarily in that condition, and then you descend again into the. But you can station yourself there also if you want. Okay, if you really want that, you can station yourself permanently in the transcendent, even in the spiritual planes of consciousness. They are a little flexible. Don't think of it as absolutely rigid. Okay, so the relation.
That means what Sri Aurobindo says, that there is something beyond the supermind. So is it the transcendence which is beyond the supermind?
That continues to be transcendent. But even the supermind is transcendent, because you need not necessarily see the physical world there. But the supermind contains both. So transcendent is a word which you have to use flexibly. Transcendent means beyond the universe. That you can experience even in the spiritual planes of consciousness. You feel yourself to be outside the universe. In other words, if you want practically, individually, you feel that you are outside your body-mind life. The body-mind life is the world. Okay? Matter, life, mind. So you are outside it. So you are in a static condition. That's what you feel. That's why you become the witness. You are not moving, you are in a static condition. The timeless, the witness, okay? Immutable. So it's a little flexible. But transcendent means beyond the universe, and can be experienced at different levels. Okay? So now we read the next one. The original status is that of reality, timeless and spaceless. It's a small paragraph. You can read that. So who will read? Gitanjali, Shilpa, Archanadi. Sometimes Archanadi is not capable of reading because of the circumstances in which she is there.
Shall I read?
Yes. Suki, I think, is wanting to read.
Yes.
Yeah. So Suki, you read the paragraph. Original status.
The original status is that of the reality, timeless and spaceless. Space and time would be the same reality, self-extended to contain the deployment of what was within it. The difference would be, as in all the other oppositions, the spirit looking as itself in essence and principle of a being, and the same spirit looking at itself in the dynamism of its essence and principle. Space and time are our names for this self-extension of the one reality. We are apt to see space as a static extension in which all things stand or move together in a fixed order. We see time as a mobile extension which is measured by movement and event. Space then would be Brahman in self-extended status. Time would be Brahman in the self-extended movement. But this may be only a first view and inaccurate. Space may be really a constant mobile, the constancy and the persistent time relation of things in it creating the sense of stability of space. The mobility creating the sense of time movement in stable space. Or again, space would be Brahman extended for the holding together of forms and objects. Time would be Brahman self-extended for the deployment of the movement of self-power carrying forms and objects. The two would then be a dual aspect of one and the small self-extension of the cosmic eternal.
Small para, not a big one. So he is discussing the same thing again. It's like the seed in the tree. Okay, so I can give you two examples, and both are very interesting. The water behind the dam is static, but the moment it is released, it has the capacity of becoming power. It comes out, and we can even harness that power. That's how electricity is generated through the dam. You make a dam, and the water is absolutely static there, infinite, eternal. In a river, it is not so. But in imagination, we can think of the water behind the dam as being infinite and absolutely pure and absolutely static. No movement at all. But the moment you put a hole in the dam and release the water, the same water becomes movement. It comes out with great force. So, with great force when it comes out, it is the physical world. Not only physical, even the subtle worlds. And when it is static behind, it is the spirit. Okay? Nirguna and Saguna. Or you can also think of it as a glacier and the river. Okay? It's very interesting. The glacier is static. Actually, it's not static. It moves at a very, very slow pace. But for all practical purposes, a glacier is solid ice, okay, which is static. But with slow movement, it melts and becomes a river and comes out. Okay, and what happens to that river? It goes and joins again the infinite ocean. So it comes from a static condition and goes into a static condition. So this movement of going from one and coming back to its origin is there at every level. Okay. So let's look at what is said. The original status is that of a reality, timeless and spaceless. Okay. This is the experience of the self. When you go to the self, you feel yourself to be without movement and without any features. Okay? You can't describe it in any way because there's no features. Featureless, okay? Without any characteristics. Completely void of any color, form, shape, size, weight, nothing. Nothing is there. It's absolutely real. The original status is that of a reality, timeless and spaceless. Space and time would be the same reality, self-extended to contain the deployment of what is within it. Now that word deployment, that's why I use the glacier and the river. The glacier deploys itself into river and even rivers. When it comes down, it becomes the many. Particularly when it reaches the ocean, it develops into a delta. It becomes so many different branches of the same river. Okay? So the one becoming the many. This is very interesting because everything in the physical world is a symbol of the spiritual truths. So this river which is starting from one and becomes the many just before entering the sea is also an interesting image. Okay? It's an image of the truth. The difference would be, as in all other oppositions, the spirit looking at itself in essence and principle of being, and the same spirit looking at itself in the dynamism of its essence and principle. So it is like Brahman, when he looks up, he sees the one. When he looks down, he sees the many. Okay. In fact, there is also, I think it's called, you have many statues also which is like that. Janus faced. Okay. It is looking this way and that way. In our India, we have the Trimurti of Brahma. Okay. So one side is going towards the one, the other side is looking at the many, and in between also there is a condition where it is conscious of both. But I think in the Roman mythology and all that, you have the, I think it is called Janus, Janus. You can check that. Okay. By the way, Yasmin, I did check your cubism and you were right. I sent you a message. Huh? So I was quite wrong yesterday when I said that Mondrian is the the originator of cubism. It is Picasso only who is the. Did you get my email? Yasmin has muted herself. So, yeah. So Mondrian is also the originator of the abstract art. Okay. So I was partly right, but not fully right. Now we go back to this thing. The word.
You know, I
Yeah.
had gone to Picasso's house in Malaga, Spain. His house is converted into a museum.
Okay.
So there I saw his Cubism art and how he was the father of Cubism. And
Yes.
that is what made him famous.
Yeah, yeah.
But once I was discussing with Temi Ben about Picasso, and she said that his blue period, which was his initial phase, which was actual art. While the Cubism is not so appreciative from an artistic point of view. But from the modern art point of view, yes, Cubism has value.
Yes.
But from the artistic point, no, the blue period, his blue period is very good. Yes. And his whole blue collection is there in Madrid in the museum, which also I have visited.
Yeah. The logic of the Cubism and all that is very interesting because the artist consciously or unconsciously wants to say that there is more to physical forms and there is a reality beyond the physical forms. So why should we stick only to physical forms? We will try to picture something which has got form, but this to correspond to the physical forms. So the whole idea of modern art, according to me, is the going beyond the physical form. And that's why they do that. So there is a logic to it, but from the aesthetic point of view, as you said, from the artistic point of view, it's a mess. So it is an attempt, but the attempts in the beginning is not very perfect, but surely one day will come when it can become perfect. The formless can be pictured in form in a much better and more artistic way. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. What's the time? 8:38. So basically what he's saying is a very small para. He's saying that there is a timelessness and there is a time and there is a relation between the two. Okay? So he's saying extension. Time is mobile extension and space is static extension. Okay? So this is very interesting because later on he will come back to it and he will see that how they're connected. Okay? Now, we've got 2 minutes, so I'll just go. We are apt to see space as a static extension. Space does not move. It's a stage in which forms can appear, but without movement, in which all things stand or move together in a fixed order. We see time as a mobile extension, which is measured by movement and event. Space would then be Brahman in self-extended status. It extends itself, but it is static. It becomes the finite, or the one becomes the many, okay? But without movement. Time would be Brahman in self-extended movement. Okay? Again, we come back to that famous statement of Ramakrishna. When the water is not moving, it is Brahman. When it is moving, it's a physical world. But this may be only a first view and inaccurate. Space may be really a constant mobile, because that also we saw. I gave you the idea of the clock. No? So you can see that both are really the same. the constancy and the persistent time relation of things in it, creating the sense of stability of space, the mobility creating the sense of time movement in stable space. Or again, space would be Brahman extended to the holding together of forms and objects. Time would be the Brahman self-extended for the deployment of the movement of self-power carrying forms and objects. The two would then be a dual aspect of the one and the same self-extension of the cosmic eternal. So again we get the idea of the level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1, movement. Level 2, the possibility of static condition without movement, but they seem to be opposites. Level 3, there is harmony of them, and both time and timelessness come from the supermind, which is the third level. That's what he's saying in the Bible. 8:40. So absolutely dot on time, and we stop here today. Next time we'll continue with a purely physical space. Okay. And